The sky outside the towering office building of Sentinel Solutions was a heavy, suffocating gray as I sat across from Diana Miller's immaculate glass desk. I watched my supervisor flip through my promotion application with practiced disinterest, her fingers barely grazing the pages I had spent weeks compiling. 5 years of sacrificed weekends, missed family dinners, and endless overtime hours were condensed into a 20-page portfolio that she barely glanced at before setting it aside. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, George," she said, adjusting her designer glasses and looking at me with a patronizing smile. "But I have reviewed your application thoroughly. While your work has been adequate, I do not believe you are qualified for senior management. Perhaps in another year or two, we can revisit this. Adequate." The word dropped between us like a heavy stone. I sat there, a 48-year-old professional, listening to a supervisor 10 years my junior dismiss my dedication. I had maintained our department's highest client satisfaction ratings for 3 consecutive years. I had personally saved the Hampton Group account when everyone else had written it off. I had not taken a full weekend off in 3 years. But instead of showing my anger, I only smiled and nodded, perfecting the practiced, neutral expression I had spent decades refining in corporate America. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "Thank you for the feedback. I am glad we are on the same page," Diana replied, already checking her watch to signal that our meeting was over. "The Hampton Group proposal needs your attention today," she added, shuffling a stack of papers. "They have requested additional operational metrics before signing the contract extension." As I gathered my things, she was already typing an email, my career disappointment completely forgotten before I even reached the door. I walked past the corner office that should have been mine, with its window view and glass door, where my name belonged. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me was not sad or even angry. He looked calculating. I started the engine and made 2 decisions that would change everything. I would cancel my upcoming vacation, and I would stop writing my daily operational guides. No one at the office knew it yet, but their perfect system was about to crash without its invisible support beam. My name is George Davis, and until that meeting, I was the most reliable employee at Sentinel Solutions. I was not the most visible or the highest paid, but I was the one who kept everything running, while others took the credit. I am methodical by nature, with an almost photographic memory for systems and processes. Growing up with 4 younger siblings had taught me to solve problems before they exploded, a skill that transferred perfectly to corporate life. When I joined the company 5 years ago, I had inherited a catastrophic mess. The previous team leader had departed abruptly after a major disagreement with management, taking all procedural knowledge with them. No documentation, no transition notes, not even the administrative passwords to critical systems. The department was in chaos, clients were threatening to leave, and nobody knew how to fix the mess. I spent 3 months reverse engineering every single workflow, staying until midnight decoding complex spreadsheets and reconstructing client histories. I created detailed guides for every process, color-coded, indexed, and meticulously organized. My boss, Diana, never bothered to learn these systems. Why would she, when I handled everything so smoothly? "You are a natural problem solver," she would say during my performance reviews, always followed by a modest raise that never matched my contributions. The company had recently landed a massive contract with Hampton Group, a major client worth millions in annual revenue. I had built that relationship from nothing, staying late to accommodate their time zone and learning their industry thoroughly. Diana had attended exactly 3 meetings, mostly to claim credit during quarterly executive reviews. Each morning, I arrived at 7:30 to prepare briefing notes for Diana before her 9 o'clock management meeting. Each evening, I sent comprehensive updates on all active projects. In between, I put out fires before anyone noticed the smoke, but the morning after my rejected promotion, something changed inside me. I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, not 7:30. Not 8:45, but exactly 9. I drafted no briefing notes. I answered only the emails directly addressed to me and ignored the rest. When an operational crisis erupted with a major supplier, I directed it to the appropriate department instead of solving it myself as I usually did. By lunch, 3 people had stopped by my desk with confused expressions, wondering why the usual reports were missing. "George, did you see the thread about the Oak Ridge scheduling conflict?" asked Edward Green from accounts, leaning over my partition. "Yes," I replied, continuing to type my own reports. He waited for more, shifting awkwardly when nothing came. "So can you fix it like you usually do?" he asked, scratching his head. I looked up from my screen. "That is actually under procurement scope," I said with a small smile. I forwarded it to Sarah Jenkins. His eyebrows rose slightly. "But you always handle these things." "I have been advised to focus more on my assigned responsibilities," I said. "I am trying to demonstrate that I understand my proper place in the organization." By 5 in the evening, I packed up my belongings and left. No extra hours, no taking work home. On my drive, I canceled the cabin reservation for my upcoming vacation, the first real break I had planned in 3 years. Instead, I would be present for the system's inevitable collapse. That evening, my work phone buzzed persistently with notifications, but I chose to silence it and placed it face down on the kitchen counter. For the first time in years, my focus was entirely on my 10-year-old daughter, Chloe. We spent the evening baking chocolate chip cookies, laughing as she attempted to shape the sticky dough into stars and hearts. The simple warmth of the kitchen and the sweet scent of baking chocolate made the corporate stress of Sentinel Solutions feel incredibly distant. As we waited for the oven, Chloe looked up at me with curious eyes. "Dad, why are you home so early today?" she asked, licking a wooden spoon covered in batter. I paused, wondering how to explain corporate politics and administrative betrayal to a child. "I decided that my time was valuable, honey, and I wanted to spend more of it with you," I said, pulling her into a quick hug. She beamed, her eyes lighting up. "Can we do this tomorrow, too?" she asked. I promised her we absolutely would, intentionally ignoring the steady vibration of my phone on the counter. By the next morning, the cracks in the department's operation were already beginning to show. The Hampton Group team had requested urgent custom modifications to their onboarding schedule, changes that only I fully understood how to execute. Diana attempted to lead the response team, but without my typical detailed briefing notes and pre-meeting prep work, she quickly became completely overwhelmed. "Where are the process files for the Hampton Group customizations?" she demanded, appearing at my desk at 10:30 in the morning, her face flushed and her voice tight with stress. "They are in the shared directory," I replied pleasantly, looking up from my monitor. "They are filed under client onboarding processes." I mentioned their exact location during last month's department meeting. Deanna frowned, tapping her pen against her tablet. "There are hundreds of folders in that directory, George." "Which one specifically?" I pulled up the folder structure on my screen to show Diana. "The master document is called Hampton Group Integration Complete Operational Guide," I explained. "It is organized by module with tabbed sections and step-by-step instructions." Diana stared at the screen, her eyes scanning the 200-page document with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "Can you just handle this directly?" she asked, her tone shifting from demanding to pleading. "The client is waiting on the line and they are getting impatient." "I would be happy to help," I replied with a calm smile. "But I am currently working on the quarterly compliance review this afternoon. It is due to the state regulators by the end of the business day." Her face tightened at my response. "This Hampton Group issue cannot wait until tomorrow," she said, her heels clicking aggressively as she stood her ground. "I understand the urgency," I said. "Would you like me to reschedule the compliance review?" "It is a regulatory deadline, so we would need to submit a formal extension request." She stared at me, realizing I was offering her a choice between two critical tasks, neither of which she could handle herself. She left without answering, her frustration evident in the sharp click of her heels down the corridor. That evening, I turned off my work phone entirely and took Chloe to the park. The autumn air was crisp, and I sat on a bench watching her play on the swings. Her laughter carried across the grass, a sound I had missed too often while sitting in dark conference rooms answering emails that could have waited. For the first time in 5 years, I felt completely present in my own life, untethered from the corporate machine. When we returned home after dinner, I turned the work phone back on out of curiosity. My screen lit up with 82 missed calls from various company numbers. The voicemails ranged from confused questions to desperate pleas, and finally to angry demands from Diana. The Hampton Group representatives were threatening to pull their contract, stating that the implementation team seemed completely disorganized. Two critical database systems had experienced synchronization errors, issues that were fully documented in my guides, but which nobody had bothered to read or understand. The quarterly compliance report remained unfinished on Diana's desk. I set the phone back on the counter, went to bed, and slept better than I had in years. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office at precisely 9 o'clock. The atmosphere was chaotic. Colleagues were rushing between offices, carrying files and speaking in hurried whispers. Diana was visible through the glass wall of her corner office, waving her hands and gesturing frantically on a video call. The regional director's assistant was waiting by the elevator, looking anxious. I walked to my desk, hung up my jacket, and began organizing my tasks for the day. "Where have you been?" Edward Green hissed, slipping into the chair beside my desk. "Everything is falling apart. Diana has been trying to reach you since Friday afternoon." "I left at 5, I replied calmly. "My contract specifies my hours are from 9 to 5. "But the Hampton Group crisis," he whispered. "They are threatening to walk. Nobody knows how to set up the integration codes." I nodded. "That process requires specific steps. It is all outlined in the documentation I created last year." "Nobody can understand your guides without you explaining them," he said, his voice rising in panic. Before I could answer, Diana's assistant appeared. "George, they need you in the conference room immediately." I grabbed a notebook and a pen, walking slowly down the hall toward the meeting room, ready for whatever was waiting. When I entered the conference room, the air was thick with tension. Diana sat at the center of the table, her eyes ringed with dark circles, and her usual composure completely shattered. Beside her sat Richard Bennett, our regional director. He was a tall, silver-haired man who rarely visited our branch unless there was a major financial milestone or a catastrophic emergency. Today it was clearly the latter. Folders were scattered across the polished table, and a laptop displayed an active email thread from the Hampton Group's executive vice president. "George," Richard said, standing up to shake my hand with an expression of relief. "Thank you for coming. We are in a difficult situation here with the Hampton Group integration, and we need your immediate assistance." I sat down, placed my notebook on the table, and looked at them both. "Of course," I said. "How can I help?" Diana cleared her throat, her voice tight as she tried to maintain some authority. "George, let us cut to the chase," she said. "I know we had a difficult conversation on Thursday, but I want to make things right. The promotion you applied for, it is yours. We will fast-track the approval and adjust your salary." I tilted my head, looking at Diana. "I appreciate the offer, Diana," I said, "but I am afraid it is too late. I have already been contacted by a competitor, and they have offered me a senior director position with a much higher compensation package. More importantly, they seem to believe I am qualified for leadership." The room went silent. Richard's eyes widened, and Diana's face went pale. "You are leaving?" Richard asked, looking from me to Diana. "When did this happen?" "I have not accepted their offer yet," I replied, "but I was planning to submit my resignation today." I reached into my bag, pulled out a manila folder, and placed it on the table. "Here is my official 2 weeks' notice. I will assist with the transition of my basic duties as required by my employment contract." Diana reached for the folder, but Richard was faster. He picked it up, scanned the cover letter, and set it down with a heavy sigh. "George, we cannot let you leave," he said. "The Hampton Group specifically requested you by name. They know you built the integration system. If you walk out, they will terminate the contract." "It is interesting that they value my work so highly," I said, "especially since Diana recently informed me that my performance was merely adequate." Richard looked at Diana, his expression turning sharp. "Did you say that?" he asked. Diana shifted in her chair, looking embarrassed. "I was just following standard performance evaluation guidelines," she muttered, trying to defend her actions. "It does not matter," I said, leaning forward. "There is a much bigger issue here than my promotion. Before I can discuss any transition, we need to address the software system that runs our entire client integration division. I am talking about OptimaFlow." Diana's eyes narrowed. "What about it?" she asked. "That is company property. You built it while working here. Actually, I did not, I said, keeping my voice steady. I began developing the core architecture of OptimaFlow 7 years ago, 2 years before I even joined Sentinel Solutions. I built it on my own personal computer, using my own resources, and I registered the patent and copyright in my own name. When I was hired, I granted the company a temporary, limited testing license to use the system within our department. I never transferred the intellectual property rights to the company. Deanna laughed, though the sound was nervous. That is ridiculous, George. We have a signed intellectual property assignment agreement on file. I saw it myself. It was submitted to the legal department last year when we pitched the Hampton Group contract. I know you saw it, Diana, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, because you are the one who uploaded it. I accessed the compliance archive last Friday to review my contract terms, and I found that document. I was surprised to see my signature at the bottom, because I never signed it. Richard leaned forward, his brow furrowed. George, what are you saying? I am saying my signature was forged, I stated clearly. The document in the archive is a copy of my employment contract signature page, scanned and pasted onto an intellectual property assignment form. Under California Penal Code Section 470, forging a signature on a legal contract is a serious offense. And because that agreement was forged, it has major legal consequences for Sentinel Solutions. Deanna stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. That is a lie, she yelled. This is just a cheap trick to extort a promotion. Richard, you cannot believe this. I did not reply. I reached into my bag and pulled out another document. This is a forensic analysis of the digital file, I said, handing it to Richard. It shows the document was compiled on Diana's computer, using her login credentials, and the signature block was copy-pasted from my original hiring packet. It even includes the specific scanning timestamp from her office scanner. Richard stared at the analysis, his expression hardening as he turned to Diana. Richard Bennett sat in silence, his eyes darting between the forensic document and Diana's pale, trembling face. The weight of the situation was settling over him. As regional director, he understood the severe regulatory and civil liabilities that comes with corporate fraud. He looked up at me, his voice controlled but noticeably strained. George, let us be very clear about the legal implications of this discovery. What are you alleging here? I opened my notebook and referred to the legal notes my attorney had prepared. Since the intellectual property assignment agreement contains a forged signature, the contract is void ab initio, I explained. Under established United States contract law, a contract that is void from the beginning holds no legal validity whatsoever. It means Sentinel Solutions never acquired the rights to OptimaFlow. Therefore, your current deployment of the system for the Hampton Group is unauthorized. By licensing my patented technology to a third party without my consent, the company is committing active patent infringement under 35 U.S.C. Section 271. Deanna tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Richard, this is a misunderstanding. We were under tight deadlines for the Hampton Group proposal, and we had to show ownership. I was going to discuss it with George later. So you chose to commit forgery to cover up a compliance failure? Richard asked, his voice cold. You exposed this entire corporation to federal and state liability just to secure your own department's performance bonus? It is worse than that, I added. My attorney has already sent a formal cease and desist letter to the board of directors and the Hampton Group's legal department. We inform them that Sentinel Solutions does not own the integration software and that any continued use of OptimaFlow constitutes willful patent infringement. The Hampton Group's legal counsel is risk-averse. The moment they received the letter this morning, they instructed their implementation team to halt all work immediately to avoid being dragged into a federal lawsuit. That is why their vice president is demanding answers. Richard closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. A multi-million-dollar contract was completely frozen, and the company was facing potential litigation from both a client and a senior employee. He opened his intercom and called his assistant. Karen, get Gwendolyn Frost from legal in here immediately and tell security to wait outside the door. Within minutes, Gwendolyn Frost, our head of legal, entered the room. She was a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had defended the company in numerous complex disputes. Richard handed her the forensic report and the copy of the forged agreement. "Review this, Gwendolyn," he said. "George is alleging that his signature was forged on this intellectual property assignment document." Gwendolyn reviewed the files, her expression growing increasingly grim. She looked at the digital forensic analysis, specifically the metadata showing the file creation on Diana's computer. After a long moment, she set the papers down and looked at Diana. "Diana, did you authorize the upload of this document?" she asked. Diana remained silent, her hands clenched in her lap. Gwendolyn turned to Richard and gave a slight nod. "The metadata is clear, Richard," she said. "If this goes to court, we will lose. Under the law, a forged contract is void ab initio, meaning it never had any legal existence. Because we never had a valid assignment of rights from George, our license to Hampton Group is a direct infringement of his patent. If they find out they have been using unlicensed technology, they will sue us for breach of contract and fraud, and George can sue us for patent infringement under 35 U.S.C. Section 271. The damages could easily exceed millions of dollars." Richard stood up, his decision made. "Diana, you are suspended immediately pending a full internal investigation," he declared. "Security will escort you to your desk to gather your personal belongings, and then you will leave the premises. Your access to the company network is revoked effective immediately." Diana looked at him in disbelief, then turned her furious gaze toward me. "You did this," she hissed. "You ruined my career." "You ruined your own career, Diana," I replied calmly. "When you forged my signature and told me I was not qualified because I was just a quiet support worker, you assumed I would never fight back. You underestimated the quiet ones." 2 security officers arrived and led Diana out of the conference room. She walked down the hallway under the watchful eyes of her former staff, her career at Sentinel Solutions ending in complete disgrace. After the door closed, Gwendolyn Frost looked at me with a professional respect that I had never seen from the legal team before. She noted that my documentation was flawless and that my legal standing was absolute. Richard Bennett then turned to me, his tone shifting to one of negotiation. "George, we need to resolve this immediately. The board will meet in 2 hours, and I need to present a solution. How do we keep this out of court, and how do we save the Hampton Group contract?" I looked at my notebook, knowing exactly what terms I would demand to settle the dispute. I looked at Richard and Gwendolyn, feeling a deep sense of calm. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. "I am willing to negotiate," I said, "but my conditions are non-negotiable. First, Sentinel Solutions must sign a formal, legitimate licensing agreement for OptimaFlow. The licensing fee will be $150,000 annually, with a 5-year minimum term. Second, I will accept the promotion, but it must be to the position of Vice President of Operations, reporting directly to you, Richard, not to anyone in middle management. My salary must be doubled to $200,000 per year to reflect the true market value of the responsibilities." Richard nodded slowly, looking at Gwendolyn, who gave a brief nod of agreement. "That is acceptable," Richard said. "What else?" "Third, I want full hiring and operational authority over my department, including the budget to hire 3 additional systems analysts," I continued. "Fourth, the company must issue a formal written statement to the entire team, clearing them of any operational failures and acknowledging their contribution to saving the Hampton Group account. And finally, I will not sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the forgery. I will not seek publicity, but I refuse to sign away my legal rights to speak the truth." Richard looked pained, but Gwendolyn was pragmatic. Given the alternative of a patent infringement lawsuit and a criminal investigation for forgery under California Penal Code Section 470, she advised him to accept. "We agree to your terms, George," Richard said, extending his hand. "The board will ratify this agreement this afternoon. Gwendolyn will draft the contracts immediately." I shook his hand, knowing that my quiet dedication had finally been recognized. Gwendolyn Frost was pragmatic. Quickly outlining the details of the agreement, the company would pay the licensing fee of $150,000 in quarterly installments, and my new salary would take effect on the 1st of next month. We also agreed on a comprehensive transition plan to stabilize the Hampton Group integration, which would now be officially powered by OptimaFlow, under a valid commercial license. Gwendolyn drafted the paperwork in real time, and within an hour, Richard and I had signed the documents. As I walked out of the executive suite, I felt a profound sense of achievement. I had not only protected my rights, but I had also secured my future on my own terms. Over the next 3 months, the department underwent a complete transformation. With Diana gone, the toxic atmosphere evaporated. I moved into the spacious corner office, but I kept the door open, a symbolic gesture to my team that I was always accessible. My first act as vice president was to promote Edward Green to senior systems director, and I hired 2 talented junior developers who had been stuck in entry-level administrative roles. Together, we optimized the operational pipelines of OptimaFlow, reducing departmental overtime by 40% while increasing implementation speed. The Hampton Group integration was completed ahead of schedule. Their executive team was so impressed with our new operational efficiency that they expanded their contract to include 2 additional product lines, increasing our annual revenue significantly. Their CEO personally called Richard to praise the company's turnaround, noting that the operational clarity we provided was the best they had ever seen. My personal life changed just as dramatically. I was home every evening by 6 o'clock, spending time with Chloe. We built models, worked on her homework, and went to the movies on weekends. One evening, as we were washing dishes after dinner, Chloe looked at me with a smile. "Dad, you seem much happier now," she said. "Do you like your new job?" "I love it, honey," I replied. "I get to help people do their best work without having to hide in the background." "Like you did before?" she asked. "Children see more than we think." "Yes, exactly like that," I said, smiling as I dried a plate. "I learned that you do not have to be loud to make a difference. Sometimes, you just need to know your worth and stand up for it." Later that night, as I prepared for Monday's executive board meeting, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "The board has approved your team's expansion budget for next year," it read. "Unanimous support. You have completely changed how this company operates." "Congratulations, George." I set the phone down, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. This victory was not about revenge against Diana, nor was it about corporate status. It was about creating a system where quiet competence is valued, and where talent is recognized before it is pushed to the edge. The corner office was a nice perk, but the real victory was building a workplace where no one had to become invisible just to keep the machine running. The skills that make you indispensable are the same ones that qualify you to lead. Never let a company make you feel invisible, because your impact is what defines your true worth.